Welcome to the Weathermatic Tech video series. Thank you for making the right choice, the Weathermatic Smartlink Flow modem and cloud-based software. Smartlink Flow monitors your landscape water use, not only the flow rate to alert you to high flow and low flow events, but will also monitor your water use and store the totalization data on the cloud for the life of your subscription. In this video, we'll discuss how to set up flow successfully on the Smartlink network. Air card activation and flow sensor installations are covered in different video tutorials. The Smartlink Flow modem will have two wire leads, one terminated in an RJ11 phone jack and the other with a red and black lead for flow sensor input. The flow sensor reports these pulses back to the air card, not the controller. If you do not have the second wire lead, you do not have a flow compatible modem. Please contact your authorized Smartlink distributor for a return and upgrade replacement. Your air card comes with a subscription ribbon and a Smartlink service plan card. These are important to have in activating the flow option in the software. So once we've successfully created our site, as discussed in a previous video, we'll go ahead and sync our controller to the Smartlink network by activating the SIM air card number on the right-hand side of the air card. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and click this button, New Controller, or this button, New Controller, and then we can go ahead and name our controller should we choose. And then we will enter the SIM air card number to activate it. Now we have successfully created our air card and controller. We can choose a temporary activation for 30 days. We can activate it with the plan card, which we mentioned earlier in the video, or also remember that the plan card is also printed on the front of the air card. For demonstration purposes here, and to show you guys some things that you need to know, we're going to do this temporary activation. So we have our red temporary activation at the top. If we click on Flow, this is the screen that we will see. This is actually not the flow screen that you want to see. So for demonstration purposes here, we're going to go ahead and renew it. We're going to enter our plan card number. This is a unique number, and it's very important that this correct card is used. Otherwise, you'll still have the flow columns that don't record flow, that are what we call virtual flow. Oops. And we'll activate it with that plan card. Now note when we go to the flow screen, this is what we have. The flow shutdown, the running average column, the current average column, and our limits column. So what we'll need to do is we'll edit flow settings, whether a custom flow sensor or one of Weathermatic's branded flow sensor tees. Let's call it custom. We'll have a fill time of 2 minutes. So once we've established a custom flow sensor type setting, we'll go back to edit flow settings, and we will enter the custom pulses per gallon. This is what the PPG stands for, pulses per gallon, as 10. The flow sensor diameter as a 1 inch, and the line fill time as 2 minutes. We'll save those changes, and then we could send them should we choose. Again, for our purposes, it's much easier to calibrate it if you use the Weathermatic T and the line fill time. Save the changes and send. Now keep in mind that the Weathermatic flow sensor, once I've entered this flow sensor type, the Weathermatic Smartlink is recording flow. Don't be confused that the flow shutdown alerts are disabled. Once you set this flow sensor type and size, the Weathermatic Smartlink is looking for flow pulses that will populate this current average. You can also hover your mouse over these dashed lines here. They're kind of faint, but you'll see a description of the column. It'll give you a tutorial at any time. This is always on the Smartlink network. These descriptions of what these columns mean and are for. So once we've let the controller run for about 5 run cycles, this current average will start to populate. And we'll get an idea of what these flow rates are and what our thresholds can be. So when I want to edit these flow settings, bearing in mind that flow sensing is already on, I can enable the alert, and that will open these windows for the low limit and the high flow limit. If there are numbers populated in these columns, I can apply the tolerance. A 25% low tolerance or a 25% high tolerance. If I click on this and these numbers are populated, it will automatically set these values to this threshold of 25% low and 25% high. Keep in mind, if I set these tolerances, but I leave this disabled, it turns the flow limits off. So if you set the limits or apply the tolerances and you leave this disabled, then this is going to come back returned as off on the next overnight update. You can enable them all. You can also custom set the thresholds without applying the tolerance. Keep in mind, if you set this low flow tolerance at 25% and the flow is a low flow zone, you may have to increase the threshold higher than 3 or 4 gallons a minute in range. If not, you could have a lot of nuisance faults. So we'll save these changes and send them to our controller. So now let's start putting some of our flow monitoring into practice. Let's select a program to run and send the command. You'll see here that the line fill time is still 2 minutes. We need to wait another 2 minutes past line fill time to get a proper recording of our flow. So keep that in mind. Once you send the command, you need to wait for the line fill time and then an additional 2 minutes. So for the purposes of brevity, we're going to edit here. Okay, so now we're going to take a receive command and receive the information from the controller via the Smartlink modem into the Smartlink cloud-based software. And now we'll check for flow data, which we see that we have here for zones 1 and 2. So now we want to edit flow settings. And now we have our flow settings come back. So what we'll want to do is we'll need this to run for a few days to populate this running average column before we can apply the tolerances. The tolerances will apply to the running average after there's enough data and time passed that this column populates. Our controller's been running for a few days. Through the magic of video editing, we are going to look at the results. First, you can see that our high flow limit was set at 7 gallons a minute when our average has actually been 29 gallons per minute. So this resulted in a high flow alert. Now, what you need to know is that high flow alerts and low flow alerts are treated exactly the same. And that is, when one zone has a high flow alert, it shuts down that zone and that zone only. If two zones have a high flow or a low flow alert in sequence, like zones 1 and 2 or zones 2 and 3, then that will shut down that valve and the master valve so that no further irrigation will take place. And you'll have an alert that says high flow for zone 1, but you'll also see zones 2 alert and also pump master valve flow shutdown. So now that we have this running average column populated, we can edit our high and flow thresholds. So you can see this one was enabled. We'll go ahead and enable 3 and 4. Now we're going to apply the tolerances. You can see that this column now is pre-populated. So 25% of 29 gallons per minute is 21, and 25% over the 29 gallons is 37. So I can go in here, if this is not high enough or low enough, I can manually set these thresholds to whatever value I would like. Save the changes and send. Okay, so I have this fault remaining. If I clear this fault will actually remain in the error card. That flow fault does not go away until I have a good run. In other words, this zone will have to run in between these thresholds in order to clear that alert. Just clearing it here does not clear it in the software. So if you have a high flow or a low flow alert and the controller has not been running and you say, well, how did I get this alert when the controller didn't even run? That's why. It has to have a good run, a good flow event before that error will clear. Okay, so while we're transmitting that, let's go to our reports. We'll talk about that a little bit. So we can see our temperature data. We can see our run times for the total. So how do we adjust this? So first we'll clear out the run times. Then this just shows our temperature data. We'll go in here and list the controller. Let's say we want to run it on all zones individually. And we don't want to know the run times. We want to know the totalization of the gallons. And then we'll add that on there. So this is what our total gallons were for those flow events. So you can see on December the 4th, it ran 67 gallons worth. December the 5th, 67 gallons worth. And so now, Zone 2, 145 gallons worth. Zone 3, 436 gallons worth. And now this was a very simple program that we just manipulated to change the run times on 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it ran the same amount every day, but that is our totalization figures. So now if we wanted to export that, we could do export all, or We could download the report that we just ran. We can manipulate the timeline here. If we want to know the last 3 months, the last 7 days, which would be more appropriate since this just came online. So download that. Now, depending on which browser you're using, where this file goes, I'm partial to doing this in Google Chrome because it downloads it right to the bottom of the window. All right, so let's go back. So that's how you run your flow reports on your controller, and you can actually, you know, if you wanted to do everything grouped, just to know the totals, you can add that report on here, and then that's the totalization. We ran 856 gallons on December the 10th for all the zones that ran. Okay, so go in here and play around with this. You can do some things like advanced settings, set the color of the graph that you want on your report, things like that. That's under this advanced settings. But this is where you'll manipulate between gallons and run times. All right, so let's go back to the controller. Okay, so we can see that these flow rates have changed. These are actually not the volume in gallons, so don't be worried about this. This is actually the flow pulses, you know, the raw flow pulse data number, so don't be disturbed if you see that. So let's see if we can get that error, flow error, to come back. Okay, so our receive came through. Our flow event went away. Now we can run this zone. Again, we want to run it for at least a minute past our flow time, our flow live fill time. So in this case, we'd have to run it for at least 3 minutes, do the receive, get the information back. So again, a couple of things to keep in mind. Just to reiterate, if I enable the zone flow alert, I also have to change the threshold, and if I change the threshold, I also have to enable the flow alert, or else when it comes back on the overnight, these will be disabled and this will go back to 0. So I have to do both of these simultaneously. Also, that my flow alerts, low flow alerts and high flow alerts are treated the same. One alert on one zone will stop that zone, will cease irrigation for that zone. If I have 2 in sequence, then it will shut the master valve down and no further irrigation will occur. These 2 alerts are treated the same. Also, once I set the flow sensor type, the irrigation is always searching for flow. These do not have to be enabled in order to get flow sensing data. Thank you for continuing to support water conserving innovation. Thanks for watching.